My children think I am senile, so they have no idea I am auditing this entire nursing home. My children, one a busy politician and the other a successful businesswoman, placed me in this gilded cage called the Golden Sunset and believed that money could replace affection. The staff, led by the director with his slick smile, whisper behind my back that I have lost my mind, that I am just a harmless ghost drifting through the luxurious hallways. They are wrong. They do not know that I see the head chef sneaking salmon out the back door, or that I recorded the director's phone call about saving costs with the cheap diapers that led to my friend's painful death. They only see a frail old woman in a wheelchair, but they do not see a former chief financial officer who is quietly building a perfect indictment. Now, all of them, from my heartless children to the greedy staff, are holding their breath waiting for my will to be read. But they do not know that in this final chess game, the true heir is not the one who carries my name. My name is Helene. Before they called me the patient, or the old lady in room 301, people used to call me the chief financial officer. My entire life's work was dealing with numbers and the truth. I could look at a report and know instantly if it was telling the truth or a lie. It all started not because of old age, but because of a fall. It was just a small puddle of water in the kitchen, but for my son Antoine, it was a political disaster. What concerned him was not the bruise on my hip, but the image of a politician letting his own mother live alone unsafely. My daughter, Isabel, is always busy with her fashion collections. For her, I was a problem that had been neatly solved. They put me in here, paid a large sum of money, and believed their responsibility was over. I felt I was not a mother, but an expense that had been paid. The dishonesty here is present in the smallest details. Take Wednesday lunch, for example. The menu on the wall read, pan-seared Norwegian salmon. But what they placed in front of me was a piece of frozen tilapia. The insult was not in the cheap fish. It was in the assumption that I was too old, too confused to notice the difference. They underestimated me. And as I was staring at that piece of fish, Monsieur Gérard, the director, walked by. He was giving a tour to a couple, a fake smile plastered on his face. I felt disgusted by the way he sold peace of mind while he was stealing every penny from our meals. The lies of the day gave way to the lies of the night. The squeaking wheels of the medicine cart were the signal. They called the small white pills multivitamins. I already knew they were sedatives. I would hold the pill under my tongue, pretend to swallow, and wait for the nurse to leave before spitting it out. This was not an impulsive act. This was collecting evidence. The feeling of holding that small pill in my palm made me feel like I was no longer a victim. I was taking action. The reason I had to act became clearer every time I looked into Mr. Paul's room. I remember the days when he was sharp, telling stories about history with such passion. Now, he just sits there, silent, a shadow of his former self. They are not just neglecting us, they are slowly erasing us, turning us into soulless bodies that are easier to manage. Looking at him, the fear inside me turned into anger, a cold, purposeful anger. It was that anger that made me pay attention to Anna. She was the young immigrant nurse, the only one who did not wear a mask of deceit. One day she saw me skipping my meal. "You do not like the fish, Mrs. Aline?" she asked. "This is not fish," I replied. She looked at me, then at the piece of fish. She did not try to make an excuse. In her eyes, I saw understanding. For the first time in months, someone looked at me and saw a human being. That was why I decided to bet on her. "I need a small notebook and a pen," I said directly. I saw she was surprised, but she nodded. "Let me see what I can do." That night, I lay in bed, but my mind was completely awake. I no longer felt helpless. I am Helene, the former chief financial officer. This nursing home is a system, a business full of holes and fraud. They did not know that the CFO of old had not retired. I was simply conducting the final and most important audit of my career. Anna kept her word. 2 days later, as she was helping me change the bed sheets, I felt a small, hard object being tucked under my mattress. After she left, I pulled it out. A small, cheap notebook and a ballpoint pen. There it was, my weapon. My plan began by making myself completely invisible. Every afternoon after lunch, I would ask to be pushed into the hallway near the common area. But one day, instead of turning right, I faked a cough and pointed in the opposite direction toward the corridor that led to the kitchen. The nurse pushed me there, placed me in a hidden corner, and said, "You can sit here where it is quiet," before leaving. She thought I needed quiet. In reality, I needed a vantage point. From that corner, I could see the kitchen's back door, where they handled deliveries and trash. I pretended to doze off, my head bowed, my hands limp. I became part of the scenery, a harmless old woman taking a nap, and I waited. Around 3 in the afternoon, the head chef, Jean-Pierre, a fat man with a perpetually greasy moustache, snuck out the back door. He was carrying 2 unlabeled cardboard boxes. He placed them in the trunk of his old car. The next day, at the same time, it was the same boxes. That week, our menu featured beef stew. I knew for a fact that those boxes contained prime beef tenderloin, not the stringy meat we had to chew. I wrote in my notebook, JP, premium food, back door, 3 p.m. The second discovery came by chance. A nurse had forgotten me in the hallway outside Monsieur Gerard's office after taking me for a walk. The office door was not fully closed. I heard Gerard's voice, sharp and annoyed. He was on the phone. "I do not care if they are comfortable or not. Our contract specifies the cheapest kind. I am running a business, not a charity. Deliver the correct shipment so I can save on costs." I did not have to guess what he was talking about. I knew exactly how those cheap diapers felt. They were rough and always caused rashes. I wrote down, "Gerard, diapers, saving costs at any price." But all of that was just about money. The thing that made me decide I had to do something more was the death of Elodie. Elodie was in room 305, the widow of a diplomat. She had an unbreakable pride. We used to sit together in the garden, and she was the only one who did not believe I was senile. "You still look very sharp, Helene," she used to say. Last week her son came to visit. I heard them arguing. Elodie had complained loudly about everything. The deceptive food, the painful diapers, and how she always felt unnaturally sleepy. "I will not stand for this," she shouted. "I will tell everyone." It was a fatal mistake. That evening, I saw the head nurse, a cold woman, personally bring medication to Elodie. She said it was an extra dose to help you sleep better. Elodie took it. The next morning, room 305 was eerily silent. An ambulance came and quietly took her away. Monsieur Gerard announced to us in a very solemn voice that Mrs. Elodie had passed away peacefully in her sleep from a stroke. A stroke. A blatant. I knew Elodie had no history of heart problems. I knew she had been silenced. That night, I sat in my room, my hand trembling as I opened the notebook. I was no longer writing like an auditor. I wrote like a witness. Elodie. Silenced. That was the last straw. This was no longer an investigation into financial fraud. This was a war, and I would not let them win. Elodie's death changed everything. The grief quickly faded, leaving only a cold and steely resolve. My notebook was no longer just a place to record evidence. It had become a battle plan. I could not expose them on my own. I had to make them burn each other down. My plan was simple, based on a principle I had learned from corporate takeovers: divide and conquer. My first target was Sylvie, the head nurse. She was the enforcer, Gerard's right hand. She was arrogant and always believed she was smarter than everyone else. That arrogance was her weakness. A few days later, While Sylvie was checking my blood pressure, I began my act. I stared vaguely over her shoulder, as if talking to myself, a habit they had grown used to. "The boxes," I mumbled, just loud enough for her to hear. "Every afternoon, Jean, Pierre carries boxes out back. They are very heavy. They look like beef." I saw Sylvie's hand pause for a fraction of a second. She glanced at me quickly, her eyes no longer holding their usual condescension, but a flicker of suspicion. She said nothing, only tightened the blood pressure cuff a little more before leaving quickly. I knew the seed of doubt had been planted. Sylvie would never fully trust a petty thief like Jean-Pierre. Now, she would start to wonder, was he stealing on his own? Could he become a liability for all of them? The second target was Jean-Pierre, the head chef. This one was simpler. He was driven by greed and fear. I just needed to give him a reason to be afraid. The opportunity came at lunch the next day. He came out of the kitchen to see if the residents were finishing their meals. As he approached my table, I used the same trick, staring into space and speaking to no one in particular. "Monsieur Gerard's watch," I said. "It is so shiny. It must be very expensive. He must be getting a big bonus." I did not need to look to know he had heard me. I felt the sudden silence beside me. How would a man like Jean-Pierre, risking his job to make a little extra money from stolen beef, feel when he heard his boss was getting large bonuses? He would feel cheated. He would think he was only getting the scraps while Gerard was taking it all. More importantly, he would start to worry, if things go wrong, who will be the scapegoat? And then, just as I predicted, the time bomb exploded. About a week later, I was sitting in the hallway near the nurse's station. Jean-Pierre stormed out of the kitchen, his face red and sweaty. He blocked Sylvie's path. "What did you say to him?" he hissed, his voice filled with panic. "Why was he staring at me during the meeting this morning?" Sylvie looked at him with contempt. "I did not say anything. You had better keep your mouth shut, if you do not want us both to get in trouble over your boxes." It was the first confession. 2 other nurses nearby heard it. But Jean-Pierre, in his panic, went further. "My boxes? What about you?" he shouted, pointing a finger at Sylvie. "What about that extra dose you gave to Mrs. Elodie? What about that?" A dead silence fell over the hallway. The other 2 nurses froze, their faces pale. Anna, who was pushing a medicine cart at that moment, also stopped in her tracks, her hands gripping the handle. The secret was out, not because of my investigation, but because of their own stupidity and greed. From my hidden corner, I watched it all unfold. I did not feel joy. I only felt a cold satisfaction. Phase 1 of the plan was a success. The chess game was proceeding exactly as I had calculated. That day, I asked Anna to help me put on my finest outfit, a deep blue silk dress that I used to wear to board meetings. I did not need the wheelchair. I held on to Anna's arm, walking slowly but steadily into the conference room at the office of Maître Dubois, my old friend and asset manager. The room was already full. Antoine sat there, looking slightly impatient. Isabelle was busy checking her phone. They both thought this was a family meeting to rearrange my assets, perhaps to transfer some managerial power. Monsieur Gerard was also present, invited in his capacity as my caretaker. He sat there smugly, probably expecting a generous thank you to be written into my will. They all stared at me as I entered. They were surprised, not because of the dress, but because of the way I walked, because of my eyes. Today, there was no confusion, no weariness, only a cold, sharp clarity. I sat down in the head chair that Maître Dubois had reserved for me. I said nothing. I just nodded at him. "Thank you all for coming," Maître Dubois began, his voice formal. "Madame Dubois has requested this meeting to clarify a few important matters." Antoine leaned forward, ready to hear the numbers. Gerard offered a polite smile, but Maître Dubois did not open any financial binders. Instead, he pressed a button on a remote. The large screen on the wall lit up. The first image was a photo taken from a distance. Not very clear, but clear enough to recognize the head chef, Jean-Pierre, loading boxes into his car. These are images recorded over 3 consecutive weeks, the lawyer's voice announced. Coincidentally, these were also the weeks when the menu featured beef tenderloin and salmon, but the residents were only served stew and tilapia. Isabelle frowned. Antoine started to sense that something was wrong. Gerard stopped smiling. Next, an audio file was played. Gerard's sharp, annoyed voice filled the room. I do not care if they are comfortable or not. Our contract specifies the cheapest kind. I am running a business, not a charity. Gerard's face went pale. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Finally, the screen showed a laboratory report. The text was enlarged, undeniable. Supplied sample contains diazepam, inconsistent with multivitamin label. Analysis shows the pill was diluted, containing less than 50% of the standard active ingredient. My lawyer let the silence hang in the room for a few seconds. I could hear my own heartbeat, strong and vital. Then I spoke. My voice did not tremble. It was clear and firm. All of this evidence, I said, looking directly at Gerard, along with the testimony of 2 nursing staff who witnessed the argument between the head chef and head nurse regarding the death of Mrs. Elodie, will be delivered to the police immediately after this meeting. Gerard collapsed into his chair, his face as white as a sheet. Then I turned to my 2 children. They were staring at me, their eyes filled with shock, shame, and disbelief. They could not believe that the mother they thought was useless was capable of this. As for you 2, I said, my voice cold but without hatred, only fact. You paid money so you would not have to be bothered with me. You bought your own peace of mind and left me in a place like this. A fortune built on calculation and responsibility cannot be handed over to those who are careless and irresponsible. I paused, letting my words sink in. Therefore, right here, before my lawyer, I declare, Antoine and Isabelle, you are completely written out of my will. You will not receive a single cent. The room was plunged into a breathless silence. Antoine sat there, stunned, the confidence of a politician completely gone, replaced only by shock. Isabelle had her head down. I think for the first time in years, she truly felt ashamed. Gerard looked like a man who had been completely drained of life. Maître Dubois cleared his throat, preparing to continue, but I raised my hand to stop him. There was still one last thing to do. I turned my head toward the door, where Anna was standing, quiet and somewhat frightened. I had asked her to come with me today under the pretense of needing help. But the truth was I wanted her here to witness everything. Anna, I called, my voice softening now. Come here with me. She hesitantly walked over, her eyes still bewildered by what had just happened. When she stood beside me, I took her hand. It was warm and calloused from hard work. It was the hand that had patiently fed me, that had turned the pages of books for me, that had brought me a piece of chocolate on a bad day. I looked directly at my lawyer, then at my children. I said my estate would not be given to the careless, I announced, but it will be given to a person of compassion. During all the dark months at the golden sunset, only one person looked at me and saw a human being, not a burden or a contract. That person is Anna. The shock in the room now turned into utter disbelief. Antoine looked at me as if I had truly gone mad. I paid them no more attention. I turned to Anna, who was looking at me with wide eyes, unable to believe what she was hearing. Maître Dubois, I said, please record the final changes to my will. My entire estate will be divided into 2 parts. The larger portion will be used to establish the Hélène Dubois Foundation, a charitable fund to provide legal support and improve living conditions for the elderly who are mistreated in nursing homes. I squeezed Anna's hand tighter. And the rest? I continued, my voice full of pride. An inheritance large enough that Anna will never have to worry about money again. Along with it, a full scholarship, so that she can pursue the dream she once told me about, the dream of becoming a doctor. Just then, there was a firm knock on the door. Maître Dubois went to open it. 2 uniformed police officers walked in. They looked at no one else but Monsieur Gérard. "Monsieur Gérard," one of them said, "you are under arrest for investigation of fraud, neglect causing serious harm, and manslaughter." Gérard did not resist. He stood up like a puppet with its strings cut, letting them handcuff him and lead him away. It was all over. Antoine and Isabelle were still sitting there, motionless. They had not just lost a fortune, they had lost everything, including the last of their dignity. I did not look at them anymore. I only looked at Anna, who was crying silently, tears of gratitude and astonishment. I smiled, a truly peaceful smile. The final chess game of my life was over. I had not only found justice for Elodie and the others, I had found a worthy heir, not by bloodline, but by heart.